far on how things are going, both what you've seen from your position guys and the defense as a whole?
Camp so far to this point has been pretty good for our defense. We're flying around, executing, communicating well. We haven't been giving up too many big plays through practice, and at the cornerback position, it's a really competitive position. We got the veteran Trevor Williams, who's the senior, and then we got a bunch of young guys that are competing to be that number 2, 3, and 4 corner that will rotate throughout the year. So it's been really competitive and really, really promising for the season coming ahead.
How's Reed and Garrett Taylor looked to you so far?
Both of them are going to be really good players in the program. John Reed is having an exceptional camp. He's a really smart kid and he's a really driven kid. So he's performing well and he's competing hard. Garrett is competing just as hard. He's exceptional talent-wise as well, and they're both having really good camp.
You talk about Christian Campbell, guy who played some for you last year.
Yeah, Christian's having a good camp as well. You know, Christian brings a different element than the other guys. He's a little more explosive in his closing speed. He's a little more lanky than those guys as well, but his speed is his asset, and he's also a physical guy, so he's having a pretty good camp. Just want him to bring a little bit more consistency, and then, you know, he had a lot of time that he played last year, so he's going to help us a lot this year.
Has there been a specific receiver that's put the defense through its paces a little bit more than you've seen in the past?
It's a good group over there. You know, there's a good young group. Those big guys are coming in, and you know, Polk, the little fast freshman, he brings a different element. And then you have the veteran guys with Gino and Deshaun and all those guys. It's been great competition for us, and it's making our secondary better because that group is so good. So, and I hope that we're giving them the same thing back on the other end.
And we talk about facing Hack every day and how much that helps as well, you know, having a quarterback of that caliber kind of testing your guys.
Well, it's tremendous. You know, we're playing the best quarterback in the nation every day in practice, and you know, I keep telling our DBs that, you know, he has the strongest arm that we'll face all year. So we're seeing the best of what a quarterback can present to us, and the strongest arm that you're going to face all year. So, you know, we just got to stay patient with him, and you know, sometimes he makes throws that, you know, you just got to regroup and come back and play the next play just because the throw was so good.
Perry, you mentioned not giving up too many big plays. Have you guys made any big plays, memorable plays so far in camp that come to mind?
Yeah, we've made some plays. You know, I think you guys were here. You saw Malik make a nice play in the 2-minute period. You know, we've made some good plays. We're just trying to be consistent with it. You know, that's one of our points of emphasis this year is takeaways on the defense, and you know, takeaways can change the game, and we want to have more impact on the game.
Terry, when you're recruiting a defensive back, specifically a corner, I mean, what's the first trait that you look for? I mean, do all the guys you're recruiting, do they all share something in common here?
Well, I mean, it's not one in particular, but there's a multitude of things where you want length, you want speed and athleticism, but ultimately you want a guy that's a dog, a guy that can compete and wants to compete at a high level. I mean, we play in the toughest conference in the nation, and some of the receivers we're facing are going to be future first-round draft picks. So we got to have that guy that has that dog mentality, that he's willing to step to that challenge and meet it. You know, we play these teams and come into Beaver Stadium. You know, you got to be a little bit smart as well and understand our system because it's complex. So those guys have to have a couple different things and bring such a dog in them that they're willing to compete at any level against any receiver.
You mentioned the longer receivers, the bigger DBs. How much different are DBs now than from the guys you went against back in the day?
Well, it was a different era of football, and you know, everybody on the field was smaller than they are now. You know, you got, you know, I got Amani Oruwariye, who's, you know, 205-pound cornerback, which you wouldn't. I mean, he'd be a linebacker back in the day that I played. So they're just bigger. You know, guys are more athletic now. And you can find them with more length and more athleticism. So, you know, those are the mark. But at the end of the day, you want the best football player. You know, and you look at guys like Grant Haley and John Reed. They're not very big guys, but they're very good football players.
Gary, back in the day, 25 years ago, how was that camp compared to this camp?
We had different rules. You know, now you can't do the two-a-days, back-to-back days. Back then, you could do unlimited two-a-days, and just the rules are different. You know, but football's the same thing. You know, there's so many more resources in today's football that, you know, we had to adjust, and you know, with all the injuries and concussions and taking precautions to preserve the bodies, it was well needed for today's times. But it was just a different era, and you know, it's well needed for now though.
harder or easier nowadays?
It's not easier. It's just relative to the time. You know, this is what these guys know, and it's tough on them. This has been a tough camp for our guys, and you know they're putting forth great effort. You know, we have 2 practices today, and you know they're competing hard and at a high level, and we're demanding a lot of them. So you know it's physically tough and it's mentally tough on them. So it's just as hard.
How important is it to get back and do some of those situations you guys faced last year again, like you did today with the UCF situation there at the end of practice?
It's critical because you never know what the situation is going to be in that particular game. So part of practice is to practice all those different situations. So the one time it comes up in a game, your guys are prepared for it. So, you know, coach will always go over different scenarios and make sure we're aware of different situations and different types. So, you know, it prepares us for every situation, and sometimes there's situations that will never come up, but we're prepared for them just in case they come up.
That one was pretty offense focused with trying to get the field goal against Central Florida. Were there any situations in camp that were more specific to you guys, and maybe recreating a scenario from last
Yeah, he'll
season?
rotate the scenario. One day it's an offensive scenario, next day it's a defensive scenario, next day it might be a special team scenario. So, you know, it's just different scenarios, and you know, he'll present something different each day.
One of the scrimmage elements James talked about in practice last Wednesday before the scrimmage on Saturday. What did you guys learn from that scrimmage specifically for your group coming out of that?
Well, you know, we feel like we're light years ahead of where we were this time last year. You know, the guys are much more comfortable in the system. You know, we go to do our installs now. They're fully aware of what the install is. Last year, they were clueless. They'd walk out here and they just didn't quite know, and then they would start to get it day after day. But, you know, our installs are much more smooth. The guys understand the system. They're much more comfortable. Even simple things as to where the team period is going to be on which practice field. You know, those things that we take for granted. You know, your first year in, sometimes are difficult those first few days.
How much of a learning experience was that for you as well, being the new guy in the coaching staff last year? How much more comfortable maybe do you personally feel being part of the staff this year?
We're all more comfortable. You know, I got a year under my belt with this staff. You know, it's a great group of guys that have welcomed me in with open arms, and you know, now I know better how and what to expect from the staff, from Coach Franklin, and what he's expecting from me in my position. You know, a year of experience, I'm a year wiser and a year better.
Quan Worley is usually a kid, Worley, when we're here, that's often working after practice and those kinds of things. Where is he at in competition for that 4th corner spot, and what do you like about him?
DeQuan's competing well. You know, DeQuan had a couple setbacks through the offseason, but he's competing really well. He's having a good camp so far, and he's in the mix. You know, right now, you know, clearly Trevor Williams is a starter for us, and Grant Haley's doing really well. And then that next 3, 4, 5 position, they're all up for grabs. So we're still going to sort through that, and you know, we got a big scrimmage coming up this weekend, and we'll kind of let the field take care of those decisions.
As you get close to the season, what's the balance between getting your top guys enough reps that they're ready for game week and making sure some of those other guys get a chance to prove themselves?
Yeah, that's the toughest thing, you know, because camp is getting tough, so the legs are really tired. They're mentally and physically weak and tired now, and you got to get your top guys their reps to keep them sharp, but yet you got to get the younger guys developed and ready, because, you know, last year's plan, we rotated 4 cornerbacks throughout the season, and you know, we're planning to rotate again, and but we got to get some depth. You know, in our league, you got to have depth because there's injuries, there's situations, certain things arise that you got to have guys to play, and you know, that's the juggle where we got to get these guys ready with reps.
You mentioned the benefit of going against Hackenberg, having the backup quarterback, Shorley Stevens. You know, how does that help build that depth, develop those younger guys?
It's nice, you know, because you know, when you play teams with different types of quarterback, with Trace, you know, he's more athletic. He's a guy that gets out of the pocket, and once it breaks down, now that's a different element to our defense, and we got to make sure that we're pursuing at the right angles and make sure that we can tackle a good runner in the open field. So, you know, it helps us prepare for every different look of an offense that we're going to face, whether it's a pro-style quarterback or a zone read type quarterback where they're getting that quarterback out of the pocket.
Got 2 more.
Terry, how would you characterize just overall the secondary, what you've seen from them this preseason compared to last year?
The secondary is really good. We have 2 really good safeties in Marcus and Jordan Lucas, and we got some really good corners and good competition in the secondary. We're light years better than we were last year. We're much more experienced. We're much more knowledgeable back there. and we compete at a higher level than we did last year, which is expected. You know, each time we take the field, we should compete at a higher level, and I think we are doing that right now.
How about you personally, Terry, becoming a DB's coach after being an offensive-minded guy? I know you did defensive stuff in high school too as well, but what's the transition been like for you, and how much easier is it for you this year after being in it a year?
Well, it's, you know, when you're a coach, the biggest thing for being a coach is you got to be a good communicator. You got to be a good teacher, and you got to get your guys to be willing to play for you and sacrifice for you. So, you know, for me this year, I think the easier thing for me was, you know, having a year under my belt with the system, you know, knowing the system better, to explain the system better to the guys. But at the end, you know, being a good teacher is what's most important, and having those guys motivated and ready to go come Saturday afternoons.
Thank you, Coach.
Thank you.